Hi, welcome to another edition of 1 in 15. As ever, I'm going to let my guests introduce themselves.
Hi, my name's Tim Farmer. I'm a multi-award-winning author and expert witness specialising in the assessment of mental capacity. I'm also the founder of TSF Consultants, which again is a multi-award-winning company, and we're the leaders in the assessment of mental capacity for the financial, health and legal sectors.
Brilliant. Tim, it's great to have you. As you know, with this series of interviews, we're asking people to think about one big thing that's dominating their thinking at this moment. Tell me what your one is.
So Andy, I think as most people will be experienced at the minute with COVID and everything that's gone on, for me, it's about change per se.
Sure.
And it's about, I suppose, how change affects us, how we affect change.
Brilliant.
So I've always been a big believer in change. For me, change is necessary. Change is a part of life. I remember at uni once we were talking about time, and the lecture talked about time being like a train on a railway track, and it just keeps going and it keeps going forward.
Yeah.
And when I think about change, I think about the fact that time just keeps moving, keeps going forward, and we have a choice. We can either be the ones that are attempting to influence change, or we can be the ones that are picking up the pieces afterwards.
Yeah.
And for me, that also brings in the other factor that nothing stays the same forever, and everything will pass, and everything moves on. And so when it comes to change, for me, it's about, I have a choice. Do I attempt to affect the change, or do I get affected by the change and just pick up the pieces? How's change affected us in COVID? Well, for us, we overnight had to change what we do.
Yeah.
So traditionally, the assessments we do have always been face-to-face. So we'll meet with somebody in person, and I'll spend a couple of hours sitting with them. And overnight, that wasn't possible to do.
Yeah.
So we changed to doing it over video link. And at the time, people were saying to us, no, it doesn't work. It's not possible. It can't be done. And we were saying it can, and let's do it.
Sure.
And so we did that, and within a week, everybody that said it wasn't possible was suddenly going, yeah, we can do that now. Thanks.
Yeah. Sure.
In fact, when I set up the company, I was told it wasn't possible. Someone said to me, Tim, you're a nurse. You will only ever be bronze standard. The guy I was talking to said, I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I will always be the gold standard. You will never be. You will never be accepted. And here we are 6-7 years later, and we're the leading experts in the country.
Yeah.
There's a great phrase, a great old Chinese kind of proverb that says, "Don't let the man that says it can't be done stop the man that's doing it."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that. And I think, again, when we think about change, when we think about innovation, there's an element of don't let other people tell you it can't be done. Go out there and do it.
Yeah.
I know that change is hard. Change is really hard. And one of the things that I suppose that drives me and I keep in the back of my mind is constantly for me is when I come up with an idea, when I come up with something else, I look at what other people are doing. And then I think to myself, if I don't do this and somebody else does, how's that going to make me feel? And Andy, you know me well enough to know that will absolutely grind my gears. So then kind of, again, that's something that helps me motivate.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've jumped around quite a bit there, Andy.
No,
Sorry.
That's the nature of these interviews. It's not a problem. So I'm really intrigued. As you know, as a coach, dealing with change is a very common theme with clients I have. And there's that tension I find with change that, people instinctively say whether they like or hate change. Some people really embrace it. Some people really resist it.
Yeah.
Most people are probably somewhere in the middle. And my personal reflection over the years has been that most of us, we like change if it's on our terms. We like change if we've decided that the change is needed. And that might be some of the stuff that you talk about, that, we recognize the need for that change and we make a proactive decision. But obviously the change that we mostly don't like is change that's imposed on us by an external factor or by somebody else. And I think that's been one of the big things, again, in conversations I've had over the last few months, has been with people who have suddenly been forced to change. They've not prepared for it. They've not done the research. They've not done whatever coping mechanism they normally have to kind of mitigate change. It's suddenly, well, we need to, businesses that have stopped or had to radically alter how they do things overnight. And it's interesting you talk about, that your standard was those face-to-face interviews, and now almost your standard is certainly at the moment, your standard is the video interfaces, and that every change brings possibility and challenge. And sometimes, we reach the possibility, and other times we're defeated by the challenge or the difficulty. And one of the metaphors I quite like, and I found useful, is the metaphor of surfing the wave, of kind of trying to get up there. You don't always know whether you're going to ride it to the finish. You don't always know, sometimes I can't surf at all. But, sometimes you see people, they look like they're doing everything right, but suddenly the wave just throws them off. And then they've got a choice of just, going back to the beach broken or trying to catch the next wave. So in terms of your experience of helping people wrestle with change, or perhaps wrestling with the own change, how can you move it from change that feels imposed to feeling that you've got some kind of level of control over it?
So for me, I think it's about, first of all, accepting that change is going to happen and it's inevitable.
Yeah.
And then it's about identifying a plan to say, right, what do I now do? How do I take these steps forward?
Yeah.
Again, thinking about these Chinese metaphors and stuff, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Sure.
And it's about breaking. So quite often change and feels insurmountable. It feels huge. It feels so big that we can't manage it. And it's about saying, okay, let's just look at what the next step is. Let's break this down into tiny doable chunks.
Yeah.
And let's do that first bit. And then when we've done that first bit, let's do the next bit. And then we do the next bit, and then we move on and we move on and we move on. So for me, one of the key things about change and about managing change is accepting it's going to happen, and then making a plan, and being aware that plan is going to change.
Yeah.
I often find in my experience that a part of the fear and the anxiety that comes with change is the feeling you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And you're getting swept along by the wave. You're not riding it. It's tumbling you. You're getting tossed and turned. You can't get up for the air. But it's about but once you start to make those first steps, once you start to make those plans, those feelings often shift.
Yeah.
And you start to go, okay, I'm doing something. I don't know if it's right. I don't know how it's going to end up, but at least I'm doing something. At least I'm taking some control here.
Yeah.
And one thing we know about anxiety is that anxiety is the fear of what might be rather than the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
And once you start getting into the reality and start doing it, the fear tends to go because it's more concrete and tangible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And one of the techniques I use quite often in a coaching capacity is we might, somebody's anxious about change, whether it's something that they want to do or they feel they have to do. And, we try and find examples where they've done something parallel before, because that anxiety, it freezes us, doesn't it? We kind of, we fear what might happen if we do something, and therefore we don't do anything. Yeah. And of course, doing nothing means we stay where we don't. We've already said we don't want to be. But there's that thing of saying, so with a client, I might get them to explore a parallel where they've taken that first small step, or they've made a plan, or they even knowing that plan might have to be quite adaptable. And another metaphor I've used previously is a story when I broke down in my car, not in my head, but that has. And we needed to we weren't very far from a garage. We needed to push it to the garage, but we were facing the wrong way. we were on a carriageway, thankfully safe to kind of turn it round. But what we had to do, I think I had a couple of people helping me, was we had to push the car in the wrong direction first, because you can't push a car backwards very easily, even with the handbrake off, but you can push it forward and you can steer it with the wheel. So we had to push it in the wrong direction whilst turning the wheel, and kind of do a long, slow, exhausting kind of 3-point turn, or one turn, but just a U-turn.
Yeah.
And then, so there's that metaphor again of, like, you know, taking that first step. It doesn't actually matter if it's in the right direction. It doesn't matter whether that's going to be part of the overall journey in the right direction, whatever the right direction means. But that momentum that you have by doing something makes the other steps possible. And the more steps you take, not always easier, but the more possible, the more energy, the more resources you've got to take the next step and the next step and the next step. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a brilliant metaphor. Yeah, I'm gonna steal that and use that if I can.
For it. Yeah, you don't have to actually break down your car for that one to work. So if people are listening to us at the moment and they're really conscious that, you know, perhaps they can celebrate some of the changes that they've made, whether they've been forced to make them or not, but they're really conscious that they still feel anxious, worried, threatened by change, not sure about the steps that they're taking that are going to mitigate that change properly. Is there any advice that you could give them? No pressure.
So I think one of the key things, of course, is to talk to people. Is, you know, again, the old adage, a problem halved, a problem shared is a problem halved, and that's so true. Yeah. One of the things that people often do is, you know, they will bottle it up inside, and the more we bottle it up, the scarier it becomes. Yeah. So, you know, definitely talk to people, share your thoughts and your concerns, get ideas off people, get their feedback about your plans, about your step forward. Give me the question again, Andy.
Well, just, you know, if people know that change has to happen and maybe made some positive steps, but they're really the pressures, what advice can you give them?
So I think definitely one of the key things is talk to people, get your plan, share your plan. Don't beat yourself up if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, because we all make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Be prepared to change and pivot. Just accept what it is, and try and accept in your head that nothing lasts forever. So this moment of uncertainty, this moment of fear, it will change. If it feels too much to do at the moment, don't force yourself to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And you'll know that I used to do martial arts, and you know, there's martial arts, we talk a lot about water, and when you meet an obstacle, you know, water does one of two things. It finds the gap and flows around it, or it waits and it builds up and builds up and builds up till it can go over the top. Cool. And sometimes actually, when it comes to change and managing change, there is a time to just sit and wait and be quiet and go, okay, I know the change has got to happen and I have my plan, but maybe today isn't the right day to do that, and that's okay. Let's go and find something else to do and take my mind off whatever it is that's causing me the anxiety. I think one of the worst things we can do in life is, and we all do it, is we all ruminate. At some point we sit there and we think about things, and of course the more we ruminate, the bigger it gets, the more insurmountable it feels. So I suppose those would be my kind of tips to kind of try and pull in different ways as and how suits. And I suppose that's the other thing, is there is no fixed plan that will work for everyone. So only what works for me will be very different to what works for you. Sure. Or will work for my wife. And I suppose one of the things is about acknowledging that we're all different. And that you know, it's a personal thing and a personal journey.
Sure. That's really, really helpful. Again, one of the things that I quite often do with clients is just get them to proactively notice what's going on, and deliberately, that exercise is not about any action that you take as a response to noticing. Sometimes there will be a really obvious action and it's wise to take it when you spot it. But other times, as you're saying with that I love that, I'm going to steal that one, the metaphor of the building up. You know, sometimes just noticing that, you know, you're stuck. you can't see how to get out, and that's okay. You know, it's because you're not going to be there forever. And again, that kind of that relationship we have with ourselves is so important here. You know, the one again, what I'm giving all my tricks away, but you know, one of the other tricks that coaches will do when somebody feels really stuck is we'll say, well, what advice would you give somebody else in your position? Because we know, you know, the advice we give our children, the advice we give our friends, or the advice we give our colleagues is quite often, you know, relatively wise, but the gap is often not giving that advice or not giving ourselves permission to respond to that same advice. So notice what's going on and think about what possible. And if taking a step is really good, no matter what direction it is, brilliant. If waiting until you've got the energy or the resources to take a step is appropriate, then that too is fine.
Yeah.
Tim, we've probably got about a minute left. I don't know, I've sort of slightly mucked up the timer, but we're somewhere in the ballpark of 14 minutes. Is there anything else you want to add about change, about dealing with the ever-present nature of change?
I suppose it would just be to reinforce that change is not something to be afraid of.
Yeah.
That it's happening all the time around us, and it's embrace it if you can. Embrace it where you can, and just remember that nothing lasts forever. You know, that if you're in a bad spot at the minute, that will change.
Yeah.
And it will eventually pass, and the, you know, the good times will come.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's hold on to that hope and that knowledge that you know, the good will come and the bad will pass.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. It reminds me of the only bit of advice I ever give new parents, which is that everything's a phase. You know, the phase you're in now, whether it's brilliant or terrible, will be replaced by another phase, and you will miss parts of this phase, even if it feels terrible at the moment, and you will enjoy and, you know, struggle with the next phase, but that will also be a phase. And so that's really interesting tension to hold into, that change is ever present. We can't pretend it's not happening just because it's making us feel uncomfortable. And actually so much invention and creativity comes out of change, some of which has been enforced on us, some of which we've taken a kind of proactive stance for. So that's brilliant. Tim, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Andy. It's been a pleasure, mate.